If you take out September, the Eagles went 16-1. The point differential was plus 238, was sixth best in the Super Bowl era. And the turnover differential plus 29, which is the third best in the Super Bowl era. Now, I know that we're literally excluding some games, but that's what Saquon said. So,
no, hold on,
playing by his rules.
That's not playing by his rules.
That's what he said.
It's kind of like your Trevor Lawrence.
No, but hold on. Hold on. He said we were a top 5 team ever.
But he said.
But he didn't say if you take out September, we were a top 5 team ever.
He said we were 2-2 in September, and then since then.
Yeah, but I listen to more of this podcast than I would like. I don't think he was saying, if you look at every team in NFL history from October 1 on, we're one of the 5 best.
That's he called them one of the best.
One of the 5 best.
But he's making the point of they were 500 and then they went 16-1. Yeah, well, pretty good.
The teams that I think most people have in the top 5 ever, or top 10, are teams that they had a run. Like he even said in his list, he said the Chiefs, pick a team. The Brady Patriots, pick a team. I could add the Bradshaw, Steel Curtain Steelers, pick one. The Niners of the 80s, Montana, pick one of those. And the Cowboys of the 90s, if you want to pick one. He mentioned the Dolphins of the 70s. They won back-to-back Super Bowls and went to 3 straight.
Yeah.
So
the one that didn't is the 85 Bears.
Right, 85 Bears.
Yeah.
And he mentioned the Ravens too in 2000. Yeah. What this Eagles team has to do to get into that conversation is do it again. Whether they win it or at least get back to the Super Bowl. That Bears team even went 14-2 the next year. It lost, in the divisional round. But I'll say this, Nick, for one-offs, I think you can put them up against the Ravens. The Ravens had that historically great defense. But Trent Dilfer was the quarterback. They didn't have this terrific offense. And then the Bears even, again, historically great defense, the awesome Walter Payton, but Jim McMahon is your quarterback.
But that Bears team, though, despite everyone says Jim McMahon was the quarterback, they scored the second most points in the NFL that year.
Right.
They were
but
a great
McMahon
offense.
is not a great quarterback. Look, I think for one-offs, he has a point because you got what's looking like a really good quarterback right now. You got 2 really good receivers, a defense that was second in points, first in total defense, certainly an all-time performance for a season by a running back. And then, Nick, them blowing out the Chiefs, who were an all-time great team. That says a lot, too. So I think as far as one-offs, they got an argument, but I think to officially be in the top 5, they have to continue to get close or win.
Even for one-offs, they're not one of the, as far as single seasons, they're not one of the 10 best teams ever. And I think, now.
What are you going to base that on?
I'll explain it in a second. But now, top 5 most dominant Super Bowls ever.
Oh, yeah. Doesn't that play into it?
Of course, but it's
especially against the Chiefs.
No, that's why because there have been a bunch of Super Bowls used to all be blowouts.
Right.
There have been a bunch of Super Bowls where teams won by far more than 18, and we can even say if this one they really won by 30 because that's what it was when. But we saw the Cowboys, the Niners over the Chargers. It's because who they beat that it looks better. But the 5 best teams, in my opinion, of all time, most of them are quite a bit older, and we can show you the 5 best ever, and I can give you the resume. 72 Dolphins, the number 1 offense, the number 1 defense, literally went undefeated. The 78 Steelers, number 5 offense, number 1 defense, went 14-2, doubled up their opponents in the playoffs, 102-46. The 84 Niners lost 1 game, number 2 offense, number 1 defense, more than tripled up their opponents in the postseason. The 85 Bears, number 2 offense, number 1 defense, 15-1, outscored their opponents in the postseason 91-10.
That's pretty good.
And the 92 Cowboys, number 2 offense, number 5 defense, almost tripled up their opponents in the postseason, went 13-3. The Eagles, for the record, number 7 offense, number 2 defense, and almost doubled their opponents up in the postseason, 145-77, because Game 1 against the Packers is a 6-point game or a 7-point game with 7 minutes left, and 6-point game. And Game 2 against the Rams, the Rams have on 13-yard line down 6 with a minute left. Then they had thoroughly dominant after that. The reason I said not one of the top 10 is if we just do the last 30 years.
I was going to say, because the thing about those teams, and I'm sure you know it, they all were pre-free agency.
Correct.
So you got to stack, tons of Hall of Famers.
So, but I think in the last 30 years, and there's one team that Wildes might take issue with on this, because they didn't win the Super Bowl, so maybe Brew will. But I think in the last 30 years, the 5 best teams are, and again, this isn't 1 through 5, this is chronological order. The 98 Broncos, who tripled up their opponents in the postseason. It was their second straight Super Bowl. They went 14-2. They had the number 2 offense. The 99 Rams, who everyone thinks that they were just offense, number 1 offense. They also had the number 4 defense. They went 13-3. They outscored opponents in the regular season by 284 points, a record at the time. The undefeated Patriots, who are the greatest football team I've ever seen, they didn't win the Super Bowl, and
you
so
can't put them in though. I agree with you. They're the best looking. They're the greatest team I saw, but they didn't. They didn't close the game.
Kind of.
But so, and then the 16 Patriots, which I think was the best Patriot team ever that won the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs, the first year of this 3 straight Super Bowl run, or when Mahomes won MVP and they were still light show on offense, and the defense was excellent by the end of the year. That to me is the fight. So most dominating Super Bowls, best final 3 quarters of a season. Like, there's a lot of things where we can do, but I just don't think there is a fair argument that of all the single seasons we've seen in NFL history, one of the 5 best was the one we just saw from Philadelphia. I just don't. And
I think you make a good point, but you mentioned the blowout Super Bowls. Most of those blowouts, I wouldn't say, dare I say, if all of them, weren't against historically great teams.
Well, the Bills one is weird because the Bills, the 92 Cowboys, they blew out a Bills team that at that point, though, they had been to 2 Super Bowls, lost one on a heartbreaking field goal, another one, or missed field goal.
But you can't compare them to the Chiefs.
No, I'm not.
The Chiefs got the best quarterback we feel like
I'm not comparing them to the Chiefs. I'm saying it's not, they weren't all like the Niners.
They were good teams. They got to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They were good teams, but this was a historically great team, the Chiefs, and still is, in the midst of a dynasty, and they shellacked them. I mean, I think that has to count for something.
Who were they were the 7th best offense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So were there other teams like I know the Lions had the best offense. You don't have that list. I don't mean
Bengals, Lions.
The Bengals are up there, didn't make the playoffs. Like, I wonder if there were so many teans that were just like so focused on offense that because are they getting penalized because they weren't?
No, I mean, they're not getting. I don't even understand what you mean. Like the
Bengals had no defense. Steelers in Chicago on November 23rd.
Oh, that's what he's talking about.
It was a nice,
What? Why do you? I don't.
He didn't have to.
Because
say
it was
that.
like a little girl who asked the question, so he was trying to be nice.
Okay.
Oh, that's all you think it was?
Well, I don't know. I listened to this podcast. I listened to a decent amount of this podcast.
And he sounded other places like he wasn't maybe coming back?
I don't know. It's tough. I'm trying to learn about the Steelers, and next thing you know, I'm talking about God knows what.
No,
I'm trying to focus on the Steelers.
It's not tough. It's not complicated. This is objectively terrible for the Steelers. And people can be like, well, Brett Favre signed with the Vikings in August, and they were really good that year. Here's the distinction. Brett Favre the Vikings were not, holding a seat open for Brett Favre. The players were not practicing as if Brett Favre was going to be our quarterback. He was retired. Yeah. He then thought the Packers would have him back. They wouldn't. He ended up going to Minnesota. In that new Favre doc on Netflix, the short one, which isn't really about football, but Peter King talks about that moment and being in Favre's kitchen with Favre's agent in August talking about this whole thing. So here's my point. The Steelers have OTAs tomorrow. Is anything positive going to come of that from the offensive side of the ball? If you're a Pittsburgh Steeler, are you really trying to get on the same page with Mason Rudolph? Does timing matter? Is anyone on the Steelers offense going to be able to think as if this is important? How could they? And what do the coaches do? Be like, well, Mason's our quarterback. Like, honestly, how do they message it? Do they lie to him? Do they say, okay, we all know our real quarterback's not here? How do they do it?
I assume that's what's going to happen.
Okay, well, it's a waste of time.
And for the record, Jeremy Fowler today reporting that Kirk Cousins plan B. So
for the Steelers?
For the Steelers.
Yeah, okay.
Look, I've said it before. I get it. You can't enter the season with Mason Rudolph as your quarterback and think you got a chance. I personally think it's going to end badly with Rodgers in Pittsburgh, even though I've been saying for eons that's where he's going to end up. And had he gone there months ago and been as all in, at least apparently as all in as he was with the Jets, despite the trip to Egypt, like when he went to the Jets, he was saying the right things. He was working out with the players, stayed around. He came back when he got injured. Like, there's none of that with these Steelers.
Go ahead.
And I just think that I've said it, and I'm going on the record. I think this is going to be the first losing season for Mike Tomlin with Aaron Rodgers quarterback. To me, the one good thing I don't think it's going to happen, but yeah, certainly if they made a playoff run with him, that'd be great. But to me, the one realistic positive I can see coming out of this is if Will Howard, who I actually like Will Howard.
Gets reps?
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
No. He just learns at the feet. And I get it. You can say there's a lot he's going to have to not learn from Rodgers off the field.
Sure.
But just learning at the feet of Rodgers as a quarterback, and maybe he can become something for the Steelers.
My last point on this. Rodgers, however long ago, went on McAfee, was like, listen, I have a lot going on in my personal life. Some of it seemed pretty dramatic. I don't know what I want to do. And I'm only saying this because there's so much misinformation going on. And then disappeared. And I think in that moment, people then, I think, wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt to a degree, and maybe even Steeler fans were like, okay, what more? Listen, he's being honest. He's telling us this. When he does this 3 hours with Rogan podcast tour, that thing is talking about anything and everything in the world and super available and chilling. And the rest of the team is starting to practice tomorrow. It feels less like, okay, he's a guy conflicted about his decision, and more like a guy who wants a chill summer. And I think that is a fair reading of it. And I think him flirting openly with the Steelers while everyone else is going to be sweating in pads tomorrow, or maybe not in pads, but whatever, practicing tomorrow, is a bad look and bad for the team.
You know what'll make it a better look? If it's truly 10 or 15, even $20 million. Like, remember he talked about I'll play for 10? If he gets 40 or something, it's going to be like. Of course,
yeah. But he said
But if it's 10, 15, something like that,
then hey.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.